Hi everyone, welcome to my presentation on the dark side of the internet. Today I decided to focus on app permissions, the good, the bad, and the ugly of them. So what are app permissions? Like most of you have a smartphone, you've downloaded apps, they're beautiful, wonderful things. Every time you download one, it's going to ask you for permission to access certain data on your phone. So for your weather app, it's going to ask for your location because it wants to give you an accurate reading on the weather of where you're at. Same thing with Maps, Uber, Waze. It's going to ask for the location so it can give you accurate directions. Even though apps are great, like most things, there is a downside, and that is where we get to the dark side of these app permissions. Now on the surface, they make sense, but when you delve a little deeper, things get a little crazy. So here's a quick rundown of what can be bad about app permissions. Some apps store unencrypted data, so if someone gets access to that information that shouldn't have access to that information, it is written out in plain text, all of your information. They don't have to try very hard to figure out what it all means. Some apps sell user information, so third parties, whether it's to an advertising company or someone less reputable, then they have your information now. There's a possibility of making more than one account vulnerable to hacking, so if you use single sign-on and you're in an app and it says sign in with Facebook or Google and you click one of those and they get information from that, someone who shouldn't have it, they now have access to your Facebook account and your Google account and any other account that unfortunately uses the same password, which I know can be a bad habit for some of us. These apps can also use your own contacts against you. Again, if someone gets access to that information for your contacts, they now know all your friends' email addresses, phone numbers, home addresses, what have you, and they can not only hurt your friends, your contacts, but they can also hurt you by finding out who you email most frequently, and then they can send you a virus through that email, and then you don't think anything of it because it's someone that you email all the time. They can also give open access to your bank account, so as we all know, with some of those fun games, there are in-app purchases that will help us, level up a lot quicker, but in-app purchases mean that your bank account information is now being used in order to get those levels. So if, again, someone gets that information that shouldn't, they now have access to your bank account information, which nobody wants because we all want to hold on to that money that we work so hard for. Last but not least, compromised unique device identifiers, or UDIDs. So these are numbers unique to your device and they can easily be used to track people. So most of us only have one phone, so with that phone you have your UDID, and if someone has that information, they can now track you through that phone. And if that number is compromised, it cannot be changed. You can't call someone or write a strongly worded letter saying, hey, can you change this ID number for this phone? They're going to tell you no, it's not possible. Now, there are different operating systems trying to work around that risk. So Apple, they've gotten pretty strict about what kinds of apps they allow in their store, so they no longer accept apps that use UDIDs. They're like, you don't need that information, so if your app runs on that, we don't want anything to do with it. Android is not as strict, so 55% of paid apps use them, 87% of free apps use them, and 100% of free Android game apps use them. So Android users, you might want to double check on your apps and make sure that your stuff isn't getting compromised. How to keep it safe. Now that I've scared you into all of the dark things about app permissions, what can you do to make sure your data isn't compromised? So Tim Wyatt, who's a director of security for a mobile security company called Lookout, said that a data source that exists is a data source that may be attacked and it must be safeguarded. The only truly safe data repository is one that doesn't even exist. So there isn't any way to be 100% safe from your security being compromised, but there are ways that you can make it a lot safer day to day. So these are the 4 main things that I've narrowed it down to. First thing, before you even buy an app, read the app reviews. So if someone's data security has been compromised, they're going to complain about it. They'll write it in their review. You can read it for yourself, and then you can decide whether or not you're going to trust that app or not. If there's no reason for a certain app permission, don't grant that permission. If you have an app that's asking for your contacts and it makes no sense for them to have access to that, don't grant them access. It's as simple as that. Just click don't allow. Uninstall apps that you no longer use. some apps can still pull information from your phone even when you're not using that app. So better safe than sorry. If you haven't touched this app in months, just delete it. Peace of mind. Last but not least, the biggest takeaway from this is to take the time to manage your apps. Don't be lazy. It only takes a few minutes. And I'll quickly show you. So for Apple, if you go into your settings and you go down to privacy, that little hand, stop in the name of security, you will be taken to the next screen, which gives a whole list of different types of permissions that apps might ask for. So location services, contacts, calendars, reminders, photos, all that jazz. And if you click on that, it'll show you which apps have asked for permission to that specific category. So for instance, on the right for the microphone category, these apps have all asked permission to use the microphone, and you can decide, give all of them access, none of them, you can change this anytime. So you can give them all access, or maybe, YouTube doesn't make the cut and you can, deny them access to the microphone. Now with the Android operating system, I'm not super familiar with it, but I did find, of course, an app that will help you figure out what you've given permission to and what you haven't. So if you look on the left, you can see it can be broken down into categories, applications, different types of permissions. Or if you look on the right, it gives you the specific app and all the different permissions it's using. So for Facebook, it shows there that you've given it, 20 different categories of permissions that you verified, and you can go in and decide, okay, maybe I want to give you this and maybe I don't. But that's basically the end of my presentation. Again, if there's just one thing you grab from this, it's just to take the time to really make sure each app has the proper permissions. Some need certain things and some don't, and just take the time to really pay attention to that. Here's a list of my references, so if you have the time, please go through and check them out. There's a lot of good information on, why these app permissions aren't necessary and what you can do to keep your data a little bit more secure. But having said that, thank you so much. I hope you enjoyed this presentation.